let's take a look on how we might reflect a function around the x-axis or the y-axis. Okay? We'll call this reflections. All right, so two types of reflections. We can reflect across the x-axis or we can reflect across the y-axis. Let's take a look at this first one. Let's say we're given a function y equals f of x. When the right side of the equation, y equals f of x, is multiplied by a negative 1, then the new function, y equals negative times f of x, is going to be the reflection about the x-axis of the graph. Now, it's going to be a lot easier if we look at an example. Okay? So let's start with a function, say the square root of x. And we'll multiply that function by a negative 1. And let's see what happens. Again, you should know what the square root of x function looks like. Okay, that's part of the library of functions. Now, according to my rule, if I multiply square root of x by a negative number, it's going to flip the function across the x-axis. So, what does negative square root of x look like? Well, it's going to be this function, except we're going to flip it over the x-axis. And that's all there is to it. Okay? So a negative number out in front, we're just going to reflect the function right over the x-axis. All right. Not too difficult. Well, we could also have a y-axis reflection. So let's take a look at the rule here. So we're given a function y equals f of x, just like we have y equals square root of x or something. Then the new function, y equals f of minus x, is going to be the reflection about the y-axis. So if we start with, say, square root of x, okay, notice that if we plug in a minus x, we get the function square root of minus x. Okay? Now let's take a look at what those functions look like. All right. So we know again what the square root of x looks like. Now we have to figure out, what does the square root of minus x look like? Well, according to my rule, it's just going to be a reflection about the y-axis. So I'm going to take this function here, I'm just going to flip it across the y-axis, and I've got it. Okay? So two types of flips or reflections. Make sure you know the difference. If we have a negative out in front, that's going to flip around the x-axis. Okay? A negative inside the function. So take a look at the difference between these two. Here's a negative outside the function. Here's a negative inside the function. And that's going to flip around the y-axis. Now, you might want to create a table of values and convince yourself that this is true, but you could also take my word for it. So let's summarize. You might want to write this down. Here's a summary of what we just have done. Given the graph of y equals f of x, if you put a negative out in front, that's going to reflect the graph about the x-axis. A negative inside the function will reflect the graph around the y-axis.